This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Prime. In association with Micromax. Nothing like anything.
It's very hot, it's very futuristic, and it's very fast. Our BMW i8 review. The subcompact space is getting sexier. Just how good is the Tata Zest? And the Audi A3 is ready for its India debut. Hi folks, welcome to CNB. I'm Siddharth Vinayak Patankar. We have packed in a lot as always, so there's lots for you to look forward to. But of course, I'm going to start off by talking about this car. Now, the i8 is the perfect flagship for the BMWi brand, isn't it? Because it really looks the part, it looks futuristic, it really gets a lot of attention, but does it deliver on performance? Well, that's what I'm here to find out. We're just outside of Milan, really beautiful countryside. It is just the right setting to get started then for all the details on this car. Is it the dawn of a new era or simply another new car launch? Yes, okay, so that's not just any new car. A new sports car launch then? Well, it's both. The latest from BMW comes from its sub-brand, BMWi, and it represents everything the Bavarian carmaker wants from its future. The car looks like $1 million since it has stayed true to its concept. But more than anything else, the part that has excited me is that it is every bit the sports car it promises to be, not just a hybrid or even just a hybrid sports car. The i8 is a hybrid. There are two drivetrains that work together to provide optimal and efficient performance. The first is the all-electric drivetrain that powers the front wheels. Here you have an electric motor with an output of 131 bhp and 250 Nm of torque. At the back, it's a transverse engine mounted on the rear axle. This is the same 1.5-litre 3-cylinder unit we saw in the new Mini, though it is tuned very differently. It produces 231 bhp and 320 Nm of torque and powers the rear wheels. The combined power output of the car's twin-power turbo and e-drive systems is a very healthy 362 bhp. And BMW claims best mileage figures of 47.6 km per litre, though in real-world conditions with bad traffic or maximum sporty performance all the time, that figure will still only drop to a very respectable 13 km per litre. This is a sports car, folks. That is why that figure is so remarkable. The car has an e-drive mode. Press this near the start-stop button and the car will only run on battery power as a front-wheel drive. Now you can drive the car in the e-drive mode, which means that it will only run on the electric motor. It can go a distance of about 37 kilometers on the outside on just that mode before it has to switch on the petrol engine as well. Outside of that mode, when you're driving in comfort or even in the sport mode, in fact more so in the sport mode, the car keeps on sending the regenerative power back into the battery pack. So it keeps on charging, it keeps topping it up. Plugging in is not necessary though, as the car's battery also gets charged every time the petrol motor comes into play. The i8 can go 0 to 100 km per hour in 4.4 seconds. Top speed is 250 km per hour. And just in electric mode alone, you can go as fast as 120 km per hour. So even though you have the option to plug in this car, you don't really ever have to plug it in. The comfort mode is where most people will end up driving because it's a mix of the two engines, and it's where the car decides the optimal sort of power utilization. So it gives you efficiency, but it also gives you the power when you need it. Sport mode, well, I don't have to tell you what that is, do I? It pretty much relies just on the gasoline engine there, and that's when you really want that hyper performance, something that a sports car is meant to do. In sport mode though, you do send back the maximum regenerative power to the battery pack. You can also drive the i8 in Eco Pro when in hybrid or all-electric modes, where the car runs as optimally as possible, regulating gear changes and throttle response to gain the best efficiency possible. Now when you want to change the character of the car, you can go from Comfort to Eco Pro down here on the button, but if you want to go to Sport mode, you got to switch the gear shift to the left and vroom, instantly the engine comes to life. The entire display changes as well. You go from blue to a reddish amber sort of a tone, so you know, yeah, even from the sound, that you're driving in sport mode. Alright, let's give this baby a little bit of a whirl, shall we? Do that again. There's slow moving traffic up front. It's effortless how the car switches between the two motors, even when you're driving in comfort mode, because unlike some of the other hybrids where you have this little gimmicky screen that keeps telling you where the power is coming from, it's distracting. Over here the car just sort of takes charge for you. It tries to give you the optimal performance in terms of efficiency, and yet doesn't take away from the fun factor at all. Gear changes are quick and the paddle shift is very responsive. The big highlight of the drive for me was simply how well the car hugs the road. The i8 has the lowest center of gravity of any BMW model today. Its width of 1942mm, which includes a 1644mm track, and the relatively low height that stays below 1300 mm is also a reason the car feels so planted. And yes, the other bit I enjoyed, the i8's handling is just sublime, as is the instant acceleration. Remember, the electric motor also gives you instant peak torque, and the car very often drives in all-wheel drive mode. In fact, it has a near 50-50 weight distribution. The question you have is, does it drive like a sports car? Simple answer, yes it does. It's quite remarkable really what engineering today has been able to achieve, because well, it's got the character of a sports car. You can handle it, throw it around like a sports car, and it's reassuring in many ways that you can do that, isn't it? And that was my biggest fear going into this drive. So I'm glad. Will it be a sports car? So I'm glad the answer to that was an emphatic yes. The i8 builds on the BMWi brand's philosophy. It too uses a carbon fiber reinforced plastic or CFRP passenger cell, which is the part that houses the cabin. The chassis is aluminium heavy, no pun intended, and so despite having a petrol engine and an electric motor with a battery on board, the car weighs in under 1500 kgs. The lightweight materials help offset the use of a relatively large battery pack, which of course is always heavy. The advantages are many, says the company, but the most important, of course, is just how it becomes really efficient too. Inside, the i8 is also futuristic looking, almost DeLorean-like, and could very well be the car to use if Hollywood decides to reboot the Back to the Future franchise. The sports steering with paddle shifters, cabin layout oriented to the driver, head-up display, iDrive, and a Harman Kardon sound system, plus my favorite bit, the seat belts, finished in iBlue. So will the i8 reinvent the sports car? Probably not completely, but for its innovativeness, what the world will get is some of those elements becoming more and more standard across not just sports cars, but maybe many others too. Now, when it was a concept car way back in 2009, everybody accepted the way this car looked because, hey, it's a concept. But when you get to see a production version looking very similar, very true to that, well, that's where the surprise comes in. So kudos to BMW Design to be able to deliver on that. The twin kidney grille up front has a nice, very distinct,
almost in your face highlighting of that blue color, which tells you something special going on. The BMW logo as well, rimmed by that blue. And otherwise, you start to see certain elements that really do carry through from BMW's existing product lineup in terms of styling cues. However, there are of course certain elements like the doors and also these really sharp lines. Things that you think maybe just from the point of view of styling, but it's also aerodynamics because it's a very low coefficient drag that the car has, just 0.24. And you can see this is the part of the car which is the most unusual. How often do you see this? I mean, this has purely been done to make sure that the car's aerodynamics go up. So very, very deep little crevice in here, comes out into the tail light treatment, very sharp, use of LEDs, no surprise. And then the bumper element, once again, bringing in that color, which tells you that this is the I brand at work here. Now you have different combinations. I do believe that the car looks pretty sharp in black, looks more real world as well, though the white and the silver also work for me. Now you remember the concept efficient dynamics to begin with. We have a little bit of a special connection with it here on CNB, don't we? Because way back then, when the concept car was on display around the world, it came to India and we had a very special interaction with the car and a whole lot of you. A quick glimpse of that, a little flashback, and then we carry on.
It was exactly 3 years ago that we had our special CNB Vision contest. 30 lucky winners were the only ones to get a chance to spend so much time with us and get up close with the Vision Efficient Dynamics concept car that has led to the i8 production car. We also took you to the global unveil of the BMW i brand in Frankfurt, also in 2011, and spoke to BMW head of design on just what he's tried to go for here.
Well, first of all, I would say that our intent was to do a design that shows that the future has finally arrived. Because new mobility has been on everybody's minds, and probably a lot of people are even worried about it, worried that the aesthetic is going to fall by the wayside or that emotion is going to fall by the wayside. So our intent from day one was to make sure that we show vehicles that are emotional, that will be fun to drive, and that have a very high aesthetic as well as zero emission.
So for me, it's extra special to finally have the production car ready to go, and especially so with a very clear plan of launching it in India. And like I've been saying, it's heartening that the i8 is sports car-like.
Despite it being just a 1.5-litre engine at the back, you know, it's nice that it has a little sporty, almost a little aggressive kind of a sound, because well, you miss that in a sports car if it's just not there. Does it sound like a V8 or a V10? Of course not. It's not going to either, but it's comforting to know that you do have a little angry motor in the back.
So all this is very well, but we all do know that this car, when it does get to India, will sell in very limited numbers. It will be priced prohibitively, likely in the 2 crore plus ballpark. And while playing a great role for BMW as a proud flagship, it will still be limited to just that.
I was really looking forward to driving the i8 for some months now. Did I think I'd have this much fun with it? Possibly not as much, and so it's nice when a car surprises you like that. You gotta react to it, folks. I'm driving right now on the e-drive mode, which means I'm all electric, being very green. Probably won't behave myself and go into sport mode once I'm back on the motorway. In the meanwhile, time for us to slip into a very short break here. Like I said, react to this car, and we've got lots more on the show this week, so stay tuned. Welcome back to CNB. Time now to speak about the Tata Zest. It was a few weeks ago on the show that we took you to Tata's technical center in the UK to try and give you an insight on just the larger game plan from Tata. It all begins with the Zest and the Bolt. That car is finally ready. It has the new Revotron engine, and there's so much being said about this car. We want your reactions to this. So Ashish Jha, of course, has had some time with the car. He's driven it. Here are all the details. Here's our review. And remember, folks, we want you to react to this one as well.
Interesting fact, 3 cars in the list of the top 10 selling models in India are subcompact sedans. The Maruti Suzuki Swift Desire, the Honda Amaze and the Hyundai Accent. Tata invented the segment with the Indigo CS and then was left far behind by those 3. But now it has finally been able to develop a product that can genuinely compare against the likes of the Desire, the Amaze and the Accent. Ashish drove the car and tested it to see if it was up to scratch, and the first impression straight off the bat, it's rather pleasant. The Zest has moved the game much higher for Tata Motors and is a genuinely competent product in the segment, which is heartening to know really. The Zest has a 1.2-litre Revotron petrol and the more familiar 1.3-litre diesel engine. The car that we're driving today is the diesel, and a lot of what you see, especially mechanically, will be common to the Bolt hatch that follows the Zest to the market later this year. Blame the government for the sub-4-metre constraint and therefore sedans that look stubby and disproportionate. Some of us do believe that it is simply irrational and absurd to classify vehicles on parameters like length, engine capacity and ground clearance. But having said that, the Zest comes across as possibly the most attractive car in this segment, which isn't saying much. It isn't really ramp walk worthy stuff. The chaps at Tata have devised a name for every design detail on the car, but we will keep it simple. So the grille is the typically smiling affair, and the large headlamps, which have projector lamps mind you, somehow remind you vaguely of the Indigo Manza. The front part of the car, when viewed in profile, is long and well-shaped, but the rear section is a bit too stubby and it looks forced, which it is. The rear is defined by a well-designed lamp cluster, sculpted bumper and a chrome strip that runs almost the entire length of the boot lid. The ugly duckling is still the Desire. Or is it? The Accent's rear end treatment is abysmal, but the front end borrowed from the Grand does the trick to make it look slightly edgier. The best angle to view the Zest is front 3/4. We love the fact that the Zest gets 15-inch wheels. They do lend a very balanced look overall. On the inside, it definitely feels a lot more upmarket than any Tata product before this. The dual-tone color scheme works well and the Zest doesn't do too badly here. It also comes with a lot of options. The cabin gets a new-age infotainment system that has been developed by, wait for it, Harman Kardon. The top-end trims get a 5-inch touchscreen panel that control the audio system and AC. There are voice commands, but you kind of have to memorize the syntax of exactly how the system has been programmed to comprehend them, otherwise it won't register. The knobs and buttons felt a shade down on overall quality and fit and finish, but still the Zest's interiors are a class ahead of earlier Tata cars. There are still some areas where Tata could do better in terms of quality of materials used. Now the performance piece. The diesel we had comes with the much hyped AMT or automated manual transmission a la Maruti Celerio. Remember, an automated manual transmission is in essence a manual gearbox with an electro-hydraulic mechanism that makes it act like an automatic. The hydraulic system, together with an electronic control unit, manages the use of the clutch and shifting through the cogs. The driver can depend completely on the AMT to shift all the time or shift sequentially when in the manual mode. The 1.3-litre diesel engine is the famed multi-jet from Fiat and is the iteration with a higher output, producing 89 bhp and 200 Nm. The peak torque, according to the spec sheet, is delivered between 1750 and 3000 rpm. In a real-world driving scenario, though, it's a completely different experience. If you're in regular automatic mode and drive with a relatively light-footed approach, the gearbox shifts at around 2000 revs, which is a bit annoying because when it shifts up and the revs fall, there's this drag that you have to suffer before the boost really comes in and picks the momentum up. A bit aggressive on the throttle and the response gets slightly better, but the car has very little to offer below 2500 RPM and the engine redlines at around 4000, so you don't quite have a great spectrum of revs to exploit the performance of the engine. The S or sports mode lets the rev needle go all the way to the rev limit. While the cabin is well insulated from the engine noise for the most part, things do get noisy when you shift it into manual and floor the throttle. In other words, the engine complains, as the AMT is not the quickest to respond. The regular manual gearbox may well be the quicker, faster car, so we will need to check that out at a later stage.
It's now raining extremely hard, and if I were to be driving any older Tata car, I would have slowed right down if I saw a corner coming. But not so much in the Zest anymore. Any of the Tata cars before this, they never really used to give you any real feedback from the steering. This one though, it has ample of it. The steering wheel itself is extremely small, so it's very, very nice, and it has a very good feel to it. You hold you have a very nice meaty grip on it, and as far as the response is concerned, it's fairly direct. You just have to look at the corner, chuck the car in, and it translates into instant directional changes. This is a very good thing.
Now let's look at the petrol. The 1.2-litre Revertron petrol engine is good for 89 bhp and 140 Nm, and again, like with the diesel, the torque is said to be produced between 1750 and 3000 RPM. It's not as bad as the diesel, but this 1.2 as well suffers from initial turbo lag till about 2000 RPM, beyond which it pulls clearly. The mid-range is reasonably good, and between 3000 to 4500 RPM is really where you'd like to be. There's just a hint of flat spot at around 3200, but it's not frustrating. There are 3 driving modes: City, Economy and Sports. The City mode is good for exactly what its name suggests, city driving conditions. Economy is basically a test of your patience level. Ashish says his ran out pretty much the moment he pressed that button. The Sport mode is good, and it does make a noticeable difference in the character of the car. It gets a bit zesty. The Sports mode changes the mapping slightly, and the entire character of the engine becomes hurried and happier. It suggests that you should indulge in having some fun with the car. The Tata Zest is not just a very likeable Tata product, it is a very likeable product, period. There are some rough edges in the cabin, and the quality of plastics could be a shade or two better, but it has after all been built to a cost, and that part is similar in all the subcompact sedans really. The AMT in the diesel does leave a lot to be desired, while the petrol is rather solid and very pleasant to drive. But where Tata has really scored the most is in throwing in a big list of equipment into the Zest. The focus on better engineering levels shows, and that is very heartening. When CNB took you to Tata's technical center in Europe a few weeks ago, it was apparent the company is walking the right path now, and the future does look very promising. Now the challenge is going to be on changing the perception in people's minds about Tata products, and we wish them all the very best.
So in many ways, a make or break product for Tata Motors, isn't it? Similar sort of ambition riding on a product from Audi as well. The company will be watching very closely when it launches the A3 sedan in what becomes a new segment, the premium luxury compact sedan. Now, it's not just about the segment or the fact that it's a new car. It's about how Audi chooses to position it, what are the variants we're talking about, and who's the kind of buyer that Audi wants to go after. Well, Amey and I spent some time with the Indian A3. Remember, we've already given you the full detailed review of the A3 sedan in the past, so now we want to know just what goes in to the car that's coming to India.
We showed you the Audi A3 sedan on CNB in June last year when it made its global debut. The sedan was everything it promised to be: compact, sharp and great on performance. Now remember, This car is built on the modular MQB platform and it's meant to be the very latest from the VW group and indeed Audi. So we have been curious as to how the A3 sedan will be positioned in India and what equipment it will carry. Ameya drove the India-specific car in Udaipur. In terms of the looks, the A3 is typical of the sedans from this stable. It gets bi-xenon headlamps, daytime running LEDs and large air inlets which do give it somewhat of its own character and face. Strangely enough, Audi India didn't want to share much about the variants that it's going to offer on the A3, but from what we could see, the A3 sedans lineup in India will comprise 4 variants, 2 petrol and 2 diesel. And sadly, the 1.6 diesel and 1.4 petrol are far from making it to India.
The A3 will be available in 2 engine variants, the 1.8 litre TFSI and the 2 litre TDI. We've been given the diesel to drive today, and we asked the people at Audi, why only the diesel? So they had to say that 90% of their customers are going to opt for the diesel variant. Very interesting fact.
There has been a change in nomenclature too, and the diesel A3 will now be called the 35 TDI. It's a technical term for a system used to calculate the performance of a given model and variant, but when explained to us, it makes really little sense. So, go figure. The 2-litre diesel engine churns out 143 bhp, which is more than its rivals, namely the Mercedes A-Class and the BMW 1 Series, but it's a noisy engine in comparison, and the noise seeps into the cabin at times. The petrol is ample, and it is the more exciting performer, but like we said at the start, it won't likely be the big seller.
Now for the big question. What is the price of the A3? Now we asked the people at Audi and they gave a simple explanation. They said the A3 is meant for those wanting to upgrade from, say, a Volkswagen Jetta, a Honda Accord, or even a Toyota Camry. They also say that it is a second car for those who already have or own a Toyota Fortuner or a Chevrolet Captiva. But then again, the A3 will have to battle rivals in the form of the Mercedes A-Class, B-Class and the BMW 1 Series. 25 lakhs is what Audi should aim at. But come August, when it is launched, we will know more about the car.
Having said that, the worry is that Audi may prefer to go higher up the price ladder. After all, the car we drove had MMI Navigation Plus with MMI Touch, a 7-inch retractable display, dual-zone air conditioning, rear-view camera, LED interior lighting, leather upholstery, electronically adjustable front seats and a panoramic sunroof. The base variant gets everything else except the navigation, which indicates that Audi has very clearly chosen to go high-end and not competitive with the A3. A pity really. Audi will launch the A3 in a few days, so we will know the final prices then. The A3 Cabriolet or convertible will follow around the festive season, and the A3 hatchback is also expected at the start of 2015.
It is a little dose of the future we served up for you on the program today with the i8. Now, the part of the story that's exciting to me is not just that the car is dynamic and fun to drive, but that it will be in India before the year is up. That's right, it shows a lot of confidence in our market from BMW and also in our buyer. The fact that India is getting more and more plugged into the global automotive scene excites me, makes me happy, and cutting-edge technology like this being available to our buyers, even though it may be prohibitively expensive, and so you won't see this car in every city. Perhaps you won't see too many of them, even in the big metros, but the fact that it will be available, to me, is still heartening. Please react to that point, react to everything else we've shown you on the program today, and send us any suggestions you may have. You know how to get in touch with me. Please wear your seatbelts, please wear your helmets, and please stay with NDTV Prime. Every weeknight, 8:30 p.m. is Auto Prime, brings you something from the world of wheels. I will be back next week. Arrivederci.